my name is Dane Kramberger. I am the Head of Client Success here at MindUp. I'll be handing over to Grace in just a second, but by way of a short introduction, Grace is a rapid transformational therapist and yoga teacher. She's got many years of experience delivering on this particular topic, but also many others, so you're in very, very good hands. As I say, we'll be handing over to Grace in just a sec. But yeah, today's session, we're going to be really delving into habits. You know, what are they, how they're formed, and how can we create and sustain those habits that serve us and create a positive influence in our lives. But then also maybe how can we ditch those ones that don't serve us particularly well. So I hope that's what everyone signed up for, and there's going to be some really awesome tools and techniques that Grace is going to be taking us through, so you can implement those in your daily life and really create that lasting positive change that we're looking for. Before jumping in, just a very quick note on the format of the session. So it's going to be 30 minutes of Grace delivering her presentation, but also taking us through some interactive exercises. And then there's going to be 15 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have. Please feel free at any point in the session to drop your questions in the Q&A box, also in the chat box, whichever you prefer. Me and the team will be taking a note of any of them, and we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can in the session today. If we don't manage to get to your question, don't worry, we will be following up with a link to the recording of this session and also any questions and answers that we didn't manage to cover. So I hope that all sounds good, and hope you are looking forward to the session. And I'm going to hand over to Grace now. Over to you, Grace. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dane. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So welcome everybody. Welcome to all 106 of you. Beautiful. It's a very warm, sunny day in London, so I hope you have good weather wherever you are and staying nice and cool. So as Dane said, today we are looking at unlocking life-changing habits and creating lasting change. So if you haven't already, just make sure you've got some pen and paper to hand so that as we go through the session, you can take some notes down. And from here, I'm going to share my screen with you all so that you can see the presentation. So just bear with me a second. Beautiful. All right, so we're good to go. So just a little summary of what we are going to look through today. We're going to look into exactly what habits are and the psychology of how we form them, looking at the cues, the cravings, the response, and the reward system. We're going to move on and learn about how your thoughts and belief systems really can hold you back from achieving the particular goals that you want to achieve, and then what you can do about it. And then I'm going to offer you guys up some actionable tips on how to access your subconscious mind and adopt various different habits that will positively impact your life. And then, as Dane said, we're going to finish off with a little question and answer section. So just a little introduction of myself before we start. I'm a rapid transformational therapist and I'm also a yoga teacher. So I'm going to come at you with this topic from a much more holistic perspective, less of a kind of clinical, scientific, psychological background, and more holistic. So throughout this webinar, I'm going to be offering up various different self-reflection exercises that I want you to engage in. And we're going to run through some meditation and some visualization that will help you just dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface. And as we go through these various different things, you might notice that inner critic comes out to play, the negative self-talk, oh, I can't believe you do this every single day, or why can I not get rid of this bad habit? And I want you to, just for the sake of today, just really meet yourself with a sense of kindness and compassion, right? And be aware of that inner critic, that voice, and then just let it go, right? So let's begin, shall we? Now, habits. It's a big, big topic, and we've all got them. Some good, some bad, and some have more good, some have more bad. And we've all got some level of awareness around our habits. And I believe that our daily habits really do define us and make us who we are. And they're essentially these tiny little decisions that we make throughout the day that ultimately lead to the bigger things in life, so our health and our happiness. But how often do we take a moment to really step away from our daily habits and the things that we do each and every day to determine whether they are taking us towards our goals or away from our goals? And this is something that we're going to address throughout today. So this powerful phrase here, every single habit of action is run by a habit of thought. This, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, this is what I want you to highlight in your minds. And what this is saying is everything that we do, every habit that you have in your life, every behavior that you dislike is run by a habit of thought. So in order to make any significant long-term changes to our behaviors, we've got to look at the thought and change the thought that is running it, right? So let's look at a really simple example of this, diets. Diets are great for the short term. They have great short-term benefits because they are looking purely at the habit of action. So they're looking at the eating and the exercise, but they never work in the long term because they fail to look at the thoughts, the habits of thoughts and the processes behind that person's relationship to food or that person's relationship to their body, for example. So it's really important to get this. Every single habit of action is run by a habit of thought. So keeping that in mind as we move through today, no pun intended, we're going to strip it back and look at exactly what habits are. So definition of habits is that they are a settled or regular tendency or practice that's especially hard to give up. So a habit is basically something that we do regularly, right? And so much so that it becomes automatic and thoughtless. So we do it without thinking about it. And our habits can be anything, any activity ranging from eating to sleeping and from thinking to reacting. So for example, a habit can be waking up and brushing your teeth or drinking too much at the weekends, right? And habits are formed through this 4-stage process that's highlighted there. So this is number 1, cue, number 2, craving, number 3, response, and number 4, reward. So this is the 4-step pattern that is the backbone to every single habit. And your brain runs through these 4 steps every single time. So the cue is the trigger that gets you to act. And then we've got the craving, which is the desire that you want to achieve. And then we've got the response, which is obviously the action of the habit itself. And then finally, we've got the reward, which is the positive feeling that you get from completing that habit. And as every single habit runs through this same process, if you do something enough time and something goes through that process enough times, it then becomes a habit. So if we want to start to get rid of certain bad habits or perhaps create new, healthy, good habits, it's really important to understand this and have this as your basis. And it's like when now we know the 4-step process, we can perhaps do the work to hack that habit formation process. And then an important thing to mention here is habits are learned, right? They're not innate. So when you were a newborn baby, you were a fresh little bundle of joy and you didn't have any of these day-to-day habits that you currently have, right? So you've definitely learned them somewhere along the way. And this is great news because if they are learned, they can definitely be unlearned. And if we want to build new, healthy, more beneficial ones, we can learn them. So I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen for now, just because I want to go through and highlight, the difference between good habits and bad habits. So this is going to welcome us into our first self-reflection exercise. And good habits, guys, are ones that lead us towards our goals, right? The things that we want to achieve in our life. And bad habits are ones that obviously are taking us away from our goals. And so the highlight here, the thing that is really important is our goals, things that we're working towards, things that we want to achieve. But why do we develop bad habits? If we're clear on what our goals are and we know what we've got to do to get there, why do we do bad habits? And most of the time, bad habits are a way of dealing with stress or boredom. And it might be really painful to deal with that stress, maybe the worries or the fears that surround the goals that you want to achieve. So we adopt these certain habits because they provide us with some pleasure, right? Some immediate pleasure in that moment. And it helps us to avoid that pain that we don't want to feel. It's too painful, right? It's too scary. And one thing to really get our head around here, again, no pun intended, is the mind will take you away from pain and towards pleasure. Okay, so it's automatically going to have you do things that give you pleasure in that moment. And I'm going to give you an example here. If you have a goal or you want to write a book, one day in your life, you want to write a book, and every single time you sit down to write that book, you end up scrolling on social media for hours and hours and hours, and you've not written a word of your book. And it might be that there is some real stress or some worry around the mammoth task of writing a book. And so to avoid that pain, we find immediate pleasure right there and then by scrolling through the social media, and then we get our little hit, right? So let's look at some of your good habits and some of your bad habits. And this is where I'm going to share my screen again. So grab your pen and paper, guys, and I would like you to engage in this self-reflection exercise. So make a list, please, of all of your habits. And this is from when you wake up to when you go to bed. And you might not get every single one down for now, and that's cool. Just kind of highlight the main ones, right? So from everything you do, from when you wake up to go to sleep. So as I said, brushing the teeth, drinking gallons of water, or maybe scrolling through your phone or making a cup of coffee, whatever it is, whatever your habits are, make a list of them. And I'm going to give you just maybe 30 more seconds or so to do this. And as I said, just get what you can for the sake of time down onto paper. And then once you've done that, I'm going to ask you to, next to each of these habits, I would like you to tick whether they are a good habit. So a tick next to the good habits, a cross next to the bad habits, and then just a straight line next to the neutral habits. So neutral habits are just the things that, we got to do every day. And this requires you being really honest with yourself. And it also requires coming away from, what the person next to you might consider a good habit or a bad habit. It's what you consider to be a good habit or a bad habit, right? So AKA the ones that are taking you away from your goals or taking you towards your goals. Beautiful. Okay, and then when you have highlighted some of those bad habits that you have, and apologies, we are going to hone in on those bad habits today, I would like you to circle one of the bad habits, the one that you would like to hone on particularly today, the one that's like your nemesis, the one that you're really struggling to overcome. And if you could overcome that, life would be much better. So circle that one, and that's the one that we're going to focus on. And then we're going to look at how we can start to change that habit and overcome it, right? And perhaps why we've got it. So let's go back to when you know what that habit is that you're honing in on, go back to the 4-stage process. So we've got cue, craving, response, and reward. And I would like you to highlight for that particular habit exactly what the cue is, what the craving is, what the response is, which is obviously the habit itself, and then what the reward is. So what kind of pleasure are you getting from that habit? Beautiful. And so that again goes back to hacking that 4-stage process. And what you're doing here is bringing awareness, right? You're bringing awareness into what preempts that habit and then what you're getting out of that habit. And it's important to highlight here that reward, that's step 4 of that 4-stage process. because we realize when we kind of really bring to the surface what reward we're getting from it, we realize that every single bad habit that we have in our life, everything that we want to change, everything that we want to get rid of, it's actually there because it thinks it's of some purpose to us. It thinks it's providing us some sort of pleasure or keeping us safe or protecting us from that pain or that worry or that stress, right? And when we realize this, and when we realize that actually we can find that reward elsewhere through a different habit or through letting go of that habit, when we realize this, we can kind of meet that bad habit with a sense of, you're just trying to help me. You're just trying to keep me safe from something. So we kind of meet it with this softness and this kindness. And then from there, we realize, you know what, I don't need you anymore. I don't need you in my life because you're actually blocking me and you're keeping me stuck and you're stopping me from achieving what I want to achieve. And then from that point, we can let it go, right? Good. Okay, so digging a little bit deeper from that, we're going to go back to the phrase that every single habit of action is run by a habit of thought. Now, with that particular habit that you are working with today, I would like you to have a think about what the habit of thought could be that is running that habit of action. And really take your time with this. Be honest with yourself. Brainstorm a list of things that could be going on in your mind, you know, some of those limiting beliefs. So let's go back to the book example, the writing of the book. It might be that person, you know, sits down and has the fear that they're not good enough to write a book. Who's gonna read what they've got to say? They haven't got the creativity, the wisdom, the life experience, or whatever it might be, right? So they are the thoughts, the habits of thoughts that are leading to that essentially procrastination, which is the habit of action. So be honest with yourself here. And, you know, I appreciate that we haven't got much time to do this. So this is something that you can dig a little bit deeper into in your own time, and perhaps with a more experienced practitioner on a one-to-one basis. Good. Okay, so from here, guys, I know you've been listening to me yabbering on now for a little bit. So I'm going to get you actually to all stand up, and we're going to move into a meditation. So get up from your chairs and just tilt the screen. And then I'm going to get you to just stand up and kind of do some nice intuitive movements, circle the shoulders, just take a break from all of that information, sway the body, maybe circle your head round in one direction. Good, just stretch it all out and change direction. Beautiful. And any little other movements you want to take, stretch the side of the body, and then big breath in, big breath out. Beautiful. And when you feel a little bit rejuvenated, come and sit back down on your chair and take a comfortable seat, and we'll come into a nice meditation. So just get your back nice and comfortable and rest your arms by your side, and then closing down your eyes. And I know you're just absorbing all of this information, and perhaps there's lots of thoughts racing as I speak, as we go through this hot topic. And so just let all of that kind of settle and simmer, and start to tune into your breath, breathing in and out through the nose, disconnecting from all the other stuff and connecting to yourself, your breath, the thing that keeps you alive. And then take a nice big deep breath in and just let it go out through the mouth. And then I want you to start to take a moment to feel how it would feel if you were to not have any of these bad habits in your life, if you were to be completely free of these bad habits. How would you feel if every single thing that you did in your life was something towards what you wanted to achieve, towards your goal? How would you feel? And can you feel into that feeling right now? And where do you feel what you feel? And do you feel free? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel perhaps more positive, more of a connection to yourself, sense of purpose? Whatever's coming up for you, just feel into that feeling, breathe into it. Inhaling, and every time you exhale, let go of some of that tension, worry, stress, fear that's holding you back from achieving what you want to achieve. Inhaling the good stuff, exhaling the bad stuff, the not very helpful stuff. And keeping your eyes closed here, guys, I want you to know that your thoughts lead to your feelings, lead to your behaviors. And what we're tapping into here in that 3-stage process is the feelings. And if you were to feel this way, how would you behave? And if you were to feel this way, how would you think? And so highlighting some of those habits of thoughts that we've brought to the surface here, I'd like you to, keeping your eyes closed, keeping that connection to yourself, I'd like you to come up with a few affirmations and just let these come up into your mind without you really overthinking. And if you're unfamiliar with what affirmations are, they are really positive, powerful words, sentences that are going to help counteract those unhealthy habits of thoughts. So affirmations start with the words I am. So it's not I'm, it's not when it's I am. So it's present tense. Right now in this moment, you already are that thing. So for the book example, it could be I am motivated and positive to sit down and write my book. I am full of wisdom and everyone's going to love my book. So come up with a few affirmations which relate to and are relevant to your goals and what you're trying to achieve, the end goal. And just as you could bring them to your mind, say them to yourself a few times over. I am whatever it is. I am whatever it is. And say it with conviction and really feel like you are that thing. Breathe into it. And then when you're clear on what they are, take a nice big deep breath in to close that off. Let it go through the mouth. And then open up your eyes. And before you do anything else, write down what those affirmations are so you're clear on what they are, so you can keep using them. And as you write them down, knowing that these unhealthy habits of thoughts, these negative habits of thoughts that we have, they live in our subconscious mind. And so we've got to start activating new pathways in our mind, new ways of thinking, right? So that we can start to think that way, feel that way, and then behave how we want to behave. And that's what these affirmations are for, right? They're going to help to start to exercise muscles in your mind that are positive and taking you towards your goals. So perhaps, use these affirmations daily and you can change them, you can adapt them and really make sure that they resonate with you. Cool. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. And when it comes to accessing our subconscious minds, it's a little bit difficult to do that on a day-to-day basis. It requires going a little bit deeper. Especially when we're so busy and we're getting on with our day-to-day. But there's a tool that I absolutely love to use, particularly when it comes to adopting habits that will positively impact your life. And this is meeting your higher self, right? So think about your higher self as a version of you that is like the freest, happiest, most thriving, stress-free, worry-free version of yourself, right? And everything they do is leading towards what they want to achieve, what you want to achieve. So close down the eyes again. And I know we've just done a meditation, but this is going to be a visualization. So just close down your eyes and just take a few breaths to kind of get right back into that place of connection to self. And I'd like you to bring to your mind a really clear image of you standing on this beautiful beach, somewhere really hot and somewhere where you feel really free. And you feel the feet in the sand, you feel the sun on your skin, and you're just so like happy and free and open. And I want you to take a little walk on this beach. And as you walk over across the beach, you see this figure in the background. And this figure is recognizable, and you get closer and closer to that figure, that person, and you realize that that person is you. It's a version of you. It's that highest version of you. And you meet that person, so you stand opposite that person and just take a little look. What do you see? What is that person wearing? What does their hair look like? How are they holding themselves? How do they present themselves to the world? And then I want you to notice how it feels to be in that person's presence. Does it feel like a million miles away, or are you within touching distance? And then I want you to start to connect with that person and ask that person, what do I need to do to get to where you are? And let them answer you easily and effortlessly without you really thinking too much. Just let it come to the surface. Absorb it, hear what they have to say. What do I need to do to get to where you are? And ask them, what do I need to let go of? And let them answer you again and hear what they have to say. And then imagine, visualize that they give you a great big hug and they're like fully supporting you. They want you to become them. They want you to embody them. And as they give you a great big hug and you feel that connection and affinity, you feel like they merge into your body, into your heart, and into your life. So that person, your higher self, is within you, right? So everything you need, all the answers you need, all the things you need to do, it's within you. You've already got it. And being clear and connecting to and really feeling into that person on a regular basis. And perhaps thinking about, how would that person go about that day? What habits would that person adopt? You can start to maybe embody elements of that person, elements of your higher self today. And so you can think of that higher self as like your intuition, your gut, your instinct. So with that, just open up your eyes, guys, and come away from that visualization. And again, well done. I know you've got not much time to go quite deep. So if anything came up there, make a note of it and really come back to it when you can. And when it comes to all of this stuff, making changes, and especially when it comes to habits, it can often feel like a mountain to climb, right? And especially when we're dependent on these habits, these things that we do every single day, and we kind of don't know our lives without them. But the key to making changes, it's not about these big revolutionary changes that we make. It's really about tiny little small things that we can do every single day, which we can repeat and repeat and repeat, and then they will become habits, and then they will eventually lead to the big results. Right? So it's really about small changes and one step at a time, one day at a time. And when we start to implement these small changes, you won't necessarily see the benefits straight away, but you will over time. And it's really important to, number one, keep that goal in sight. So what you're trying to achieve, what you're working towards, so that you can focus on the trajectory rather than the results. And most of all, it's important to be kind, patient, and compassionate to yourself. So this kindness, this patience, this compassion is going to make it so much easier to make these changes and overcome these bad habits, right? And if you slip up, that's okay. We are humans. We are all imperfect in our own special ways. So be light and be playful with the process. All right, and on a more practical level, talking about change, we're going to look at the laws of behavior change. So these are a very simple set of rules that we can use to build better habits, and they are make it obvious, right? So you've brought some clarity and awareness about what your bad habits are and how you want to change them and what good habits you want to implement. So how can you make these good habits that you want to implement obvious? How can you make it attractive? How can you make it easy for yourself? And how can you make it feel satisfying, right? So where can you find that reward, that pleasure, that immediate gratification, right? And again, this is something to keep coming back to when we start to implement these things. All right, so some simple habit formation tips to give you guys also. So thus far, we've been really looking at awareness, right? Bringing about awareness to our habits and the things that we want to make changes to, the things that we want to implement. And so keep coming back to the tools and techniques that I've offered, you know, the affirmation practice, the higher self. They are super useful when it comes to this sort of thing. And then a little bit on habit stacking. So habit stacking is a concept or an idea that people are talking lots about at the moment, and it's about adding a new behavior into your daily schedule by stacking it on top of an existing habit. So for example, after I turn off my alarm in the morning, I'm going to do 10 deep breaths, or after I brush my teeth, I'm going to do 5 minutes of stretching, right? So stacking a good habit on top of a habit that you already do every single day. And then we've got delayed gratification. So delayed gratification is the ability to postpone an immediate gain in favor of greater and later reward. And there are so many studies out there to show that delayed gratification is one of the most effective personality traits of successful people. So people who learn how to manage their needs to be satisfied in the moment thrive more in their careers, their relationships, their health, their finances, and all those different areas of life than people who give into it. And I would highly recommend you guys, if you are interested in the evidence behind delayed gratification, go away and have a look at the marshmallow test, and it will really, really be a light bulb moment for you. And then we've got immediate return environment. So we live in a delayed return environment, right? We go to work every day and we get paid at the end of the month. We go to the gym regularly, but we don't get fit, strong, light, lean until after a long period of time, right? So our brains are actually focused on the immediate return environment. Now, this focus on the immediate return can encourage really bad habits for us. So let's look at smoking, for example. Smoking is something that gives you lung cancer in let's say 20 years, but in that moment, it relieves some kind of stress, some kind of craving to the nicotine. So when it comes to pursuing habits, we've got to, with a delayed return, that is, we've got to make sure that we attach some immediate gratification to those habits. So having a think about how you can do this. And then we've got habit tracking. So this is literally a case of tracking daily, whether you've managed to carry out your habits and again, meeting that with that kindness and with that compassion. And, you know, you can even keep like a little diary to track whether you're on track or not. And then finally, we've got setting yourself up for success with creating new good habits. And this is all about, you know, really being specific. So if you want to have a habit of getting fit, it's not going to be very helpful to you, right? Because it's quite vague. So we've got to be really specific in order to set ourselves up for success. So the goal is to be fit, but the habit is to go to the gym 30 minutes, 4 times a week. So you're super specific. And it really allows yourself to succeed with that. All right, so lots and lots today, just as a little summary of what we went through. So our habits really do govern our day-to-day. Every single habit of action is run by a habit of thought. And remember, that's the most important thing I want you to take away. So really, really pay attention to your thoughts, allow yourself to dig a little bit deeper. We did some meditation on the feeling of habits and how they make you feel. And that's super important with that thoughts, feelings, behavior chain. We did some connection to your higher self. So continue on, connect to your higher self, get really clear, communicate with them, and continue to use those affirmations to really start to take control of your mind and activate those new pathways. And then, of course, be clear on your goals, the things that you are working towards, what you want to achieve, and have all your habits and behaviors align towards those goals. And then taking time each day just to be kind and gentle to yourself and making sure that you are enjoying the process. We can laugh at ourselves when we slip up, or we can just come back to the fact that we are all imperfect in our own special way. So before we move on to the Q&A, I think that was kind of bang on 30 minutes. Thank you so much for listening. If those of you have to slip off, my name's Grace, and I am available for you guys to book on a more one-to-one basis and work a little bit deeper through some of the concepts discussed today. So please do that if you wish, and you can follow me on social media. Also, my name on Instagram is @GraceMcGeehan. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and I hope you've gained lots and lots of value out of today's session.
Oh, brilliant. That was so great. Thank you so much, Grace. I took so much away from that. I hope you all did too. Actually, some of my key takeaways from today's session. So number one is that what you said right at the beginning there, Grace, around if there's one thing that we take away from today, so it's up there, is that habits of actions are grounded in habits of thought. And that really resonated with me because I was sharing with Grace just before the session started that actually for me, I've recently been getting back into an exercise routine, which I've really enjoyed. But, you know, just recently I've also been kind of having those automatic thoughts like, I'm too tired, or it's too hot, or kind of having those automatic thoughts that come up when I'm trying to maintain a good habit. So really looking into those, and I love that kind of the breakdown of how habits are formed, and really trying to target into those things like the cue, the craving, the response, etc., and the reward. And I think that keeping that ultimate goal in mind and focusing on the trajectory, not just the results. I'm definitely someone who's guilty of being like, why haven't I suddenly instantly lost weight? And I'm like, you know, got massive muscles. Well, you gotta stick with it. And I really enjoyed the habit stacking concept as well. Something that I've been using around the exercise, for example, is putting exercise in my work calendar at the same time every day, because I'm already in the habit of completing tasks and attending meetings based on my work calendar. So this is just another task to complete in the day. So thank you so much, Grace. We've got tons of questions, so I'm so sorry. We're probably not going to be able to get through all of them, but we're going to get through as many as we can today in this session. But as I said earlier, we are going to also be sharing questions and answers as a follow-up with the recording. So if for those of you who can stick around for another 15 minutes or so, we are going to go through some questions now. So Grace, the first one we've got is, I'm not sure, and this is a really good question, and something that hopefully you can clarify, but what's the difference between cue and craving? Can you give an example of where that difference might lie?
So the cue would be the context or the environment that would ultimately lead to the craving, right? And this is where the tricky thing is with habits, is that they are so thoughtless and they are so automatic. So if we look at like nail biting, for example, it might be that every time you drive your car, you notice that you bite on those nails, right? So the cue would be the driving of the car, and then the craving would be the need, the desire to bite the nails, right? So it's like the cue is the environment, the context. Craving is what comes really just before the action of the habit, aka the habit.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Grace. That's really helpful. Got another good one here. So we have a colleague who likes to have a cigarette at certain times each day. It takes some time out for her as part of her morning routine and brings her some comfort, as it's something that she always does, and stress can also be a big trigger for that routine. I guess where we've got habits that give us comfort, it's particularly challenging to then, when you've got that constant reward element. What would be your advice for how that particular person could tackle that routine?
Mm-hmm. So all of our bad habits will give us some sort of comfort in some way, right? And again, that is the tricky thing. So it's about how can you find that particular comfort, aka that relief of stress that person has when they have the cigarette. How can you find that comfort elsewhere? Can you go for a long walk outside, or maybe that's not so conducive to the working day, but can you take 5 nice deep breaths? So it's really about finding it elsewhere and allowing that to adopt the new healthy habits. But the first and foremost important part to that is making sure that the goal is aligning with not smoking, right? So if you realize that is the reason you're smoking, then you can let it go.
That's really helpful. Thank you. This is a really interesting question. Someone has asked, they said they'd like to have a glass of wine in an evening, but then often think of replacing that habit with, say, for example, going to the gym or doing some yoga instead. Is it bad in the sense of just replacing one habit with another? And I guess building on that question, there has been talk recently of over exercising and going too far with what could be a positive habit that then goes to an extreme. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is what I tried to highlight early on is what you consider a bad habit might not necessarily be the same as what someone else considers a bad habit or a good habit, and that's why it's really important to get honest with yourself. What is balance to you? Yeah, because society and social media can tell us what we should be doing, and what we shouldn't be doing, and that can make us feel like certain things that we do are wrong, or we should be ashamed of certain things. But it's absolutely okay to have that glass of wine, but it's making sure that the intention behind it is a positive, beneficial one. Yeah. And if the intention is good and it comes from, let's say, a place of love and abundance rather than a place of lack, then it's absolutely fine. And this, again, it's like being really honest with yourself and keep checking in. Yeah. So take a step away from your day to day and figure out, right, am I in balance? Am I doing too much of this, too much of that? Because only you know if you're doing too much exercise, if you're drinking too much wine, only you can answer those questions. So that's where we've got to kind of look in the mirror and get honest with ourselves.
Yeah, I love that, really focusing in on the intention. And I like what you said there in terms of like, if it's not about addressing a lack of something, it's about, is this creating a positive fulfillment for me? I love that. That's great. Another great question. So any books that you would recommend around habits?
The best is, and I think James has written this already, Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's amazing. And it's all about habits. It as James says, it really builds on what I've already talked about. I read that book and kind of built the basis of this presentation around that book. It's really clear, it's really specific, and there's things that you can take, things that you can leave from that book.
Amazing. Yeah, I've actually read it as well myself. I'd totally second that. And yeah, so nice to see all those concepts being brought to life by you, Grace. So thank you. A couple of people have asked this question. Is it true that forming a new habit takes 21 days, or is that just myth?
It's interesting you say that, because rapid transformational therapy, which is obviously the method that I deliver, follows the 21-day pattern. So at the end of a hypnotherapy session with my client, I will give them a recording to listen to every single day for 21 days. And the hope is that at the end of that recording, which is filled with all these positive, healthy habits of thoughts, which ultimately will lead to the healthy habit of actions, at the end of those 21 days, they've kind of done the work to recode and rewire and reframe their thought process. So I would agree with that. I'm sure there's lots of different studies out there to prove that and disprove that, and it kind of, again, it depends on the particular habit, the particular person, the environment. But yeah, definitely 21 days is a solid amount of time to really make some significant impact.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. This one is an interesting angle. So it's, we've talked a lot about today about habits and what we can do ourselves to make positive changes. What if you have someone else in your life? So the question here is, I've tried changing the habit of having dessert every day after dinner, but my husband isn't so keen to change this habit, so it makes it harder for me to then change the habit. How can I help someone else change their habits if they're then affecting mine?
Yeah, it's tricky, but it might require having a really honest conversation with your husband about how having that dessert every night is making you feel. Because if he was aware of that, he might change his need to kind of force that upon you, not force that upon you, but encourage that every evening. And it's difficult when his goal is not necessarily aligning with your goal, right? So can you come to some kind of compromise, or can you come to some kind of agreement on you doing that together? And I think what is at the crux of that is honesty and communication with your husband, right? So every habit of action is run by a habit of thought. Be honest with him about your thoughts behind that and how it's making you feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does definitely. Thank you, Grace. Got another question here. We've got time for another couple, we'll probably wrap up in the next few minutes or so. Just want to ask this one, which is about meditation. And I think it was really helpful to have that exercise today and really sort of kind of check in with ourselves about how we're feeling and how that can impact on how our habits present themselves. For a lot of people, meditation has sort of connotations with spirituality and religion. So it doesn't always feel accessible to everyone. What are your thoughts on meditation and kind of how you would encourage people to make that practice if they're not necessarily kind of into the spiritual or religious aspects that it can sometimes be associated with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would maybe if that overwhelms you or scares you, intimidates you, it might be worth seeing meditation as just like you're taking time out to do some nice deep breaths, right? And you can look at it as just literally taking time out of the day-to-day, taking time out of and disconnecting from this thing, and really connecting to your breath, which is the bridge to your body. Yeah. So we come into more feeling and less thinking. And if you are new to meditation, it's probably going to be a good idea to do guided meditation. So there's so much free stuff on YouTube. And there's loads of different apps that you can use to really allow yourself to be guided through it. And as I said, really think about it as taking time out, stepping away. And sometimes when we disconnect, when we unplug, which is what meditation is, we can then replug and reconnect and feel much more rejuvenated and feel much clearer in that process.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we're going to have just one more question. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for any others, but thank you all so much for engaging so much with the session. And we've got tons and tons of questions, which has been fantastic to see. Lots of love for you, Grace, by the way. Lots of people saying thank you so much for the session. Really helpful, lots of practical tools to put in place. So that's fab. I just wanted to end on this question. Which is someone who says that they have ADHD, which is strongly linked with a dopamine deficiency, and dopamine, of course, being a hormone that deals with pleasure and reward systems. Would you have any advice for this person with that in mind, for any specific tips for forming habits when someone's medical condition is interfering with or changing the way that their dopamine system works?
Mm-hmm. So I would say to that, Dane, that I'm not sure. I'd have to go away and have a think about that, because I wouldn't be qualified enough to comment necessarily. But what I would say is really meeting yourself, go back to the kindness and the compassion, right? So if you know that you have a little bit less of that, then you meet the bad habits with that kindness and compassion that we spoke about, and really be gentle on yourself. And maybe it's a case of it's a longer process, and that's okay, right? So I'll go away and have a think about that, and perhaps me and that person can liaise later on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Grace. Thank you again so much to you, Grace. What a brilliant session. Thank you all for attending the session today, and all the engagement and all the wonderful questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward to seeing you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week.